You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
But first, folks, college football is back, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. There's endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see, it's what you pay. Honestly, it's faster, it's cheaper, and it's less stressful than any other way that I've bought tickets. And I love that you can see the views from your seat right there in the app. Houston is off this week, but they will have a game next Saturday, the 26th, in Corvallis against a very struggling Oregon State Beavers team. They're close to me, close to my hometown. I might go to the game, not expecting great result for the Beavers, but I'll tell you what, you can get tickets for $19 a piece, pretty much right on the field in the lower end zone. There are some phenomenal deals on Game Time right now. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, folks, segment 3 here, finishing up our Houston Cougars preview. We talked about last season for the Cougs, the phenomenal finish to the year, including a one-possession loss to Florida in the national championship. We talked about this new-look roster, quartet of freshmen coming in, including 3 ranked in the top 20, what it means for Coach Sampson's team. Now we're going to take a look at this team's schedule. Once again, a strong non-conference slate for the Cougs. And when we make these schedules in our notes, we always highlight the matchups that they have against power conference teams. And against some of these schedules, we're not highlighting very many. And some of these schedules, the whole thing is highlighted because they're like Duke is playing basically all power conference teams. And this Houston schedule feels kind of similar to that, where you got some of your bye games early in the season. Duh, every team has those. Their exhibition game will be against Mississippi State in Texas. That's a quality exhibition game for them. But then your fourth game of the year, you're taking on Auburn, like you mentioned, in Birmingham, so a pseudo road game there. And then you go to Las Vegas and you draw Syracuse and Tennessee for your first 2 games there. We'll see who they get in the third game. If there's any other uniforms that are orange out there, maybe they'll see if they can draw them for that third game. I also wouldn't mind if they played the team in blue and white in Spokane. I think that'd be a fun one there too. And then December 6th, Florida State at the Toyota Center in Houston. A couple more bye games. Then you take on Arkansas in Newark, New Jersey on December 20th, which might be the best day of college basketball all season. I think there's like 20 ranked teams, it feels like, or ranked games that are going to be that day. It's going to be an absolutely nuts day of hoops. And this Houston-Arkansas game will be great. So, Parker, your thoughts now that we've seen this final non-conference schedule as it's come together for the Cougs? Feels like another kind of challenge for Coach Sampson, especially on a roster, like we mentioned earlier, with a bunch of newcomers on the team.
Yeah, and we mentioned that last year they were 4-3 at one point. You play Auburn on the 16th, Syracuse on the 24th, and Tennessee on the 25th. That's kind of that same murderer's row you went through last year without even knowing who you play on the 26th. But you play somebody that's decent, that's a pretty strong list of contenders for that spot. So that's it. That's a tough row there. I would point out too, we covered a little bit on Locked On Cougs, but for the national audience, that December 20th matchup with Arkansas was very much wishy-washy, up in the air. Both programs wanted to happen, but it was initially going to be in Barclays, and they actually kind of double booked Barclays with the women's programs at like UConn and Iowa and stuff. And so where are we going to play? They wanted to play at some destination. It's now in Newark, but it's a big TV ordeal where there's a couple other CBS games all over the country. And so Houston is fitting in with that. It is fun to be a part of the big show, though. Yeah. And I think that is something Houston fans for a long time have been waiting to get back to, and very much a program being showcased right now.
Yeah, it's extremely fun to be in those conversations, and obviously to see a program like this be willing to not only play in a MTE like this Players Era Festival, which is just loaded with talent. It was last year, it is again this year. It's probably going to continue to be as long as they're promising $1 million to every team in the event, but to also schedule tough individual non-conference games like Arkansas, like Auburn, like Florida State, to have those combined with what should likely be 3 tough games in Vegas. Again, not a lot of teams are being willing to do that, and Houston absolutely is. And with a young team, I think it's a really great kind of move for Coach Sampson to challenge his guys early. Like, you got Lehigh, Towson, and Oakland as your first 3 games. That's a good kind of way to get the beak wet for some of those guys. But then you get right into it after that. And so I'm really excited to see how this Houston team does. And the reason that we see a lot of these Big 12 teams not play those competitive schedules is because it's an absolute gauntlet when you get into the Big 12 as well. We know the SEC broke a bunch of records last year, and we know the Big 10 is always in those conversations. But this Big 12, even in down years for Kansas, even in down years for Baylor, like this conference is ridiculous. And Houston's schedule, we know the matchups for them. We know they're playing Arizona, Arizona State, Central Florida, Colorado, Kansas State, and West Virginia at home. We know on the road they got the Utah trip, Utah and BYU. They also got Iowa State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, TCU on the road, and then they got Cincinnati twice, Baylor twice, Texas Tech twice. Which, my goodness, that's a pretty tough trio of teams to have to play both times in the Big 12 this year. We'll see Baylor, brand new roster. Cincinnati's got a lot of turnover as well, but those teams are all going to be a bit of a challenge. So, Parker, with all of that said, we have seen Houston flat out dominate the Big 12 in a way that I don't think anybody could have predicted. Even the people who were the highest on Houston and Sampson coming into the Big 12 probably didn't see them going 2 years with 4 combined losses in the conference. So looking at this year with this team, with the rest of the Big 12, do you see another first place finish for Houston in the Big 12 this year?
Again, at risk of sounding arrogant once again, I do. I see a team that has all the capability to do it. I see a schedule that, while I have my critiques on it from a fan, spectator, etc., shapes up pretty well for Houston to do it.
Yep.
And frankly, I see a team that returns 3 starters for a team that was 65 seconds away from national title and replaced the holes with 5 stars. And I think that all projects to, and future Hall of Fame coach. I think it all works out in a way that by the time they hit conference play, I absolutely think this team can be a team that, again, you can't go 19-1 anymore because there aren't 19 games.
Right.
But I think this team can, win the conference. I would point out too, you mentioned like Houston's run away with this conference. They lost their first 2 games on the road out the gate. They won their first home game in the conference and lost their first 2 road games in the Big 12. And I was like, what are we doing here? We lost to Iowa State and TCU on the road. Yeah. That was back in 2024. Like, are we over our heads? And all they've done is like lose 2 games since then. Like things have worked out okay in the big picture, but I think they'll be shaping into form about that point. Now Tech is good. Kansas has always, got talent. They've had some down years. They've always had talent. A lot of respect for Drew over at Baylor. So BYU's got Debansa. You can't overlook that one. You got to go there, right? We'll get to record in a second. So I don't know that they're going to go undefeated, but I also think that they're going to win more games than everyone else. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think that they're going to be the best team in the Big 12, and it's like for all the reasons that you listed at the beginning. I mean, it's hard to deny that. Like, they return 3 starters. Most teams in this conference are not returning 3 starters. A lot of teams in this conference are not returning 3 players from their previous roster. So to return 3 starters from a team that was the second best team in college basketball already puts you at a tremendous advantage. To have replaced your departures with 4- and 5-star talent also puts you in a pretty incredible spot. And to be a program that develops talent extremely well, where those guys can take the next step, the Mercy Millers and the other guy, Chase McCarthy, like you mentioned, like if those guys can take the leap, there's not really any reason to doubt this. I think Texas Tech had a tremendous offseason. I think that they're very, very good. I saw recently somewhere that had them projected as like a 4 or 5 seed. I think they're going to be a 2 seed, maybe a 3 seed. Like, I think Texas Tech's extremely good, but they're the only team that I feel comfortable saying, yeah, there's a decent chance that they beat them because JT Toppin is that good. And I think Christian Anderson's going to take a leap and blah, blah, blah. Well, we already did our Texas Tech preview, so we'll get into that there. But yeah, I think that Houston is in an incredible spot in this conference. And record-wise for me, I think they are going to lose some games in conference play. I have them going 14-4 in conference play is my projection. I'm not going to name every loss specifically, but that's, I think they'll drop a few, but I think they're going to do great in this non-con. I actually project them right now as 12-1. I'm probably thinking that Auburn one is going to be one of the toughest ones for them, but I think they'll round into form enough to beat Arkansas. I'm not too worried about Florida State in Texas. And this would also require me to predict them to win the Players Era Festival, which would be awesome for the program. They boat raced Tennessee last year. I'm not that high on Syracuse. Depends who they get in that third game, but I think this team's going to, that would puts them at 25-5. That's somewhere in that range. I think this team is going to be that level of good once again this year.
Yeah, so for the folks that again don't know, I teach and coach by day. I do wear a lot of hats, no pun intended. I will say though, we had a sports psychologist come by one time. He's working the kids, and he said, "What do you think a good record be for y'all this year?" And kids are like, we play 30 games, like 28-2 or 27-3. Like we're pretty good, right? And he handed them all a schedule and was like, "Circle the games you think you're gonna lose then." And every kid was like, "Oh, I don't think we'll lose any game." You said you're 27-3, circle 3 games, and I don't know that I can circle 3 games that Houston will lose this year. Like I don't mean that again with the cocky arrogance, whatever. They can win all of these games.
Yep,
they are
absolutely.
talented enough. They're well coached enough. They have all the things to win all these games. They're going to be close. Auburn's going to be close. Arkansas is going to be good. BYU's going to be close. Tech, you mentioned. I don't think that they're like for sure going to win all of them by 20 or anything like that. But I think they can absolutely win all these games. I don't think it's just hard to go undefeated in college basketball. I probably settle closer to 25-5, like you said. I might go 2 non-conference losses, 3 conference losses, or somewhere in that range. But again, like they have the ability to win every game they play this year.
Yeah, there is not a game on the schedule that I look at and think there is a very little chance that they win that game. There's not a single one. Like I said, Auburn might be the toughest one because it's in Birmingham and because it's early in the season, but like the idea that Houston can't win that game is ludicrous. They absolutely can win that game. They might be favored in that game. And Auburn's got a lot of turnover as well. So, yeah, I'm with you 100%. It doesn't mean they're going to go undefeated, but there's a decent chance that they're favored or at least have a high chance of winning every single game that they play. That is how good this team is. And that kind of leads to the last thing for us here, which is Isaac and I have been doing this floor ceiling kind of what's the ceiling, what's the floor. This is a really easy one. The ceiling for this team is that they're the number 1 overall seed, that they're the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, and they win the championship. Like that is unquestionably, in my mind, the ceiling for this team. And obviously any team's ceiling in theory is that. But for this Houston team, that is absolutely attainable. It requires the freshmen to adjust seamlessly to their new roles. It requires Tugler to be the defensive player of the year, most likely. And obviously you need Uzan and Sharp to be as good or better than they've been in the past. You need some bench depth to step up, whether that's returners like Miller, McCarthy, McFarland, whoever it may be. But like that's all attainable. And for me, the floor for this team is still pretty good. Like the floor is maybe finishing 4th in the Big 12, which would be like shockingly bad for Houston, but not terrible for every other team. For the most part, it'd be like a 6-7 seed. I'd be stunned if they fell lower than that. And then maybe an early exit, a first weekend exit for this team. And that would be like the freshmen really struggle to adjust to Coach Sampson. Tugler doesn't have enough help in the front court, maybe some injuries, some ineffectiveness from some of the returners, but like, that's still a pretty high floor for this team and obviously the highest ceiling that there can possibly be. With that said, I am projecting that this team will get a 1 seed. I am projecting they will be one of the 4 best teams in college basketball, and I think they will be at least in the Elite 8. I think there's a pretty good chance they're in the Final Four and back in that conversation as a national champion as well. But I think that's kind of where I'm at with my prediction for this team this upcoming season.
Yeah, I'm also looking at a 1 seed. And again, I think that's more or less because it seems like to me, if you win the Big 12, you're a 1 seed. And I think this team is good enough to win the Big 12. And, again, the national audience, I don't know if you've necessarily clued in on, but Houston recently, the AD announced, actually pushed off their hosting duties for the South Regional, which means that the South Regional is being played at Toyota Center this year, and it's now going to be hosted by, I believe it's going to be Rice and Texas Southern, and not University of Houston, which means that Houston can play in the Toyota Center in the Sweet 16 Elite 8. And I understand that there are a lot of factors, and you got to get to the Sweet 16 and all that. I feel like we'll be talking about being disappointed in March, though, if we got to the Sweet 16 in the Toyota Center and didn't get to the Final Four. And I don't mean that, again, in the arrogance. Your listeners are going to hate me by the end of this because they're like, this guy thinks that they don't lose a game. But honestly, unless they got put in a different regional because of some other South team wants Toyota Center or whatever, I don't know that they're going to have home court advantage in so many ways in that Sweet 16 Elite 8 round. Then they have to go to the Final Four and they play Purdue and Indianapolis, something stupid, right? But like that'll be how that works out. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's not a crazy thing to set as far as floors and bars. And I've talked too long about it, but all things healthy,
Mhm.
I still think they're a top 5 seed.
Yeah.
All things healthy, takes a while to gel, shooting
Mhm.
goes away, whatever. I still think the defense carries a lot of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anything lower than a 5 seed would be pretty surprising. I think it's possible, but I think it would be surprising. And to your point, anybody who's listening who doesn't think that Houston at the Toyota Center in the Sweet 16 not making the Final Four would be a disappointment, yeah, it would be a huge disappointment. They should absolutely make it to the Final Four if they're playing in Houston once they get to the Sweet 16. They got to get there, obviously. And I mean, hell, like last year, they one of the closest games they played was almost not making the Sweet 16 against Mark Few and the Zags. But you get there and you're playing in Houston, you're going to be, it's a cushy spot to get to the, any team playing Houston who has to play them in Houston is going to be really unhappy about that draw. I can promise you that. Parker Ainsworth, thank you so much for jumping on the show. Appreciate your expertise and your insight into this team. Excited for another fun year of Houston basketball. Folks, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Isaac will be back with you all for a preview for a Big Ten school on Wednesday's show, and then he and I will be back together on Friday to get you ready for the ACC conference preview show as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And as always, we want to say peace out.